Welcome back. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and we're looking at another Space Invaders game. Let's call this one Space Invaders 1999, although in Japan it was known as Space Invaders X. This game got released on multiple platforms. I'm showing you the PlayStation version here, but it also came out for PC, Nintendo 64, and Game Boy Color. Now, if this game looks familiar after this opening cutscene, well, I've got news for you. It's Space Invaders 2002. Yeah, we already covered this. We talked about the Game Boy Advance version of this exact same game. Both of them are from Z-Axis, but this one was published by Activision, whereas the Game Boy Advance version was developed by Taurus Games, then published by Activision. But they are essentially the same. The only thing missing from the Game Boy Advance version is the opening cutscene, which shows a tank driver going to a tank graveyard and seeing a sign that says, "In memory of those lost in 1978, which is when the original Space Invaders came out. Otherwise, everything you're seeing here is exactly like the Game Boy Advance game, except the Game Boy Advance game doesn't have the significant loading times between levels, and this version might just be a little graphically superior, but if you squinted hard enough and looked at it, you might think the Game Boy Advance version looked exactly the same. They are remarkably close, but I actually prefer the Game Boy Advance version just because it loads faster and seems to run a little less, how do I put it? Not laggy. I'm not saying that the PlayStation version is laggy, but it just doesn't feel as responsive as the Game Boy Advance version. Maybe it's because the playfield is slightly smaller due to the Game Boy Advance resolution, or maybe it's just that they optimized it for that platform compared to PlayStation, but it just seems to be faster than the PlayStation version. That's the best I can tell you is by feel. It feels slower than Game Boy Advance, even though it is the same game with the same waves, the same shields, the same power-ups, basically the same everything. It's just weird that technically the Game Boy Advance game would have been scaled down to fit into a cartridge, removing certain resolutions and features, and yet it actually is a more enjoyable game to me compared to the PlayStation release. I don't know how else to say it other than that. It is the same game. 1999, 2002, PlayStation, Game Boy Advance. It is basically the same game. So, really, when it comes down to what you want, it probably depends on what platform you have. If you have a PlayStation or a PC or a Game Boy Color or a Nintendo 64, get this one. If you have a Game Boy Advance, get the other. But if you have both, heck, I'd get the Game Boy Advance version because personally, I think it's the more optimized, more fun, faster moving, superior version. If you want to base it on price, we can do that as well. Let's look at what it goes for on PlayStation as of the recording of this video. $687 loose, $949 complete, $21.95 new. That makes it just a little bit cheaper than the Game Boy Advance version. Let's see. Yes, $15.47 loose, $33 complete, $44 new. So the PlayStation version is the more affordable version of the two. But again, to me, it's worth the extra money you would pay for the Game Boy Advance version. Not to mention, if you have a GameCube player, you can stick that version in the Game Boy Advance and play it on your TV. And maybe if you have the HDMI adapter for your GameCube, it might even look similar to the PlayStation version, or perhaps it might just possibly seem better if you're using a custom scaler instead of the built-in one with the Game Boy player, whereas the PlayStation 1 video output could just be less clear, although not nearly as pixelated when that is scaled up to a big screen in HDMI. But if you're a nostalgic old school gamer, you might actually like it looking a little pixelated. So I suppose there's arguments to be made for both. I just don't know what the argument is to own both because it's the same game. Honestly, when I started filming this, I was like, ooh, PlayStation version of Space Invaders. Let's see how this differs from everything else that I played. And then after the opening cutscene was over and I got into the gameplay, I was like, oh, dang it. This is the same as the Game Boy Advance. How did I not even realize that? Well, I guess that just speaks to the fact that Space Invaders gets ported multiple times. So not only does the classic version get ported multiple times, the remakes get ported multiple times. It just can't be helped. Taito is going to milk the ever-loving heck out of the Space Invaders franchise from now until the end of time itself, or till all life ceases to exist on this planet. Don't know which one of those would come first. Not in a hurry for either one of them to happen, quite frankly. But maybe we just have to keep fighting off these Space Invaders to keep the apocalypse from coming. So, play Space Invaders any way you like. Play it here, play it there, play it anywhere. Play it with an emulator, play a physical copy, play at your own peril if you're playing it in zero gravity in outer space without a suit on, because then you're going to explode before the aliens do. Not a wise choice. And yes, even the enemy bosses are exactly the same in this version of Space Invaders. In a moment here, when I clear this wave, you will see the filing cabinet of doom hopping around and slamming into the ground and trying to take me out with its gigantic metallic thumping body, going clang, 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 smash, clang, 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 smash. Wow, that could be the beat for a techno song. Clang, 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 smash, clang, 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 smash. The system is down. The system is down. If anybody just got that joke, thank you. You're a longtime follower of Homestar Runner and Strong Bad Emails. So, Space Invaders. Lots of versions of it, but this one is no different from Game Boy Advance, or vice versa. PlayStation version, Game Boy Advance version. The Game Boy Advance version no different from PlayStation. PlayStation no different from Game Boy Advance. Just one has more cutscenes than the other. Same game, same enemies, same wave, same name, same everything. Except it's called Space Invaders X in Japan and Space Invaders EX in Japan if you're playing it on Game Boy Advance. That's all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Mr. MegaManFan signing out.